That's why you heard on the CNN, or some of you have been watching this in Iran, is down with Russia. Even the Iranians who are willing to go into the streets to fight for their freedom, a revolution that I was involved in 30 years ago against Khomeini. Now his son wants to suppress them even more. The students are going into the streets yelling freedom for Iran and against Russia. Down with Russia, up with America. And what do? We do nothing. We do absolutely nothing. I give credit to the British. At least British intelligence officers were kicked out of Iran, so at least they tried. I hope we have assets there. I won't say anything about it, but the reality is never has Iran been more susceptible to any kind of invasion, manipulation, military and covert action than they are now, and never have I seen us more bereft of a strategy, a tactic, or a president who could stand along those who fight for freedom. When Obama was asked, support these freedom fighters, he couldn't say anything but mumble some nonsense and equivocate, just like he did before.
Right, and I think you brought it out so skillfully on our last interview. You don't need bombs, and you don't even need to go the way we seem to think that you just bomb everybody into submission if you just stand up for that one word. But, you know, it's pretty tough for fascists, and these are my words, okay, but a more and more, Nazi, these are my words, so, you know, you could probably change it.
Use whatever words you want.
Nazi-like regime, you know, when the freedoms in America are no longer cherished, when the military no longer takes their oath, now I'm not saying all, but the contemporary military does not recognize the oath and how the manipulation is going on, because number one, Steve, most of the guys I talk to, trust me, they know all the weapon systems. They know they're the bravest men and the most dangerous men in the world. But when it comes to basic finance and how they're being absolutely marginalized, they don't get it. And the opportunity in Iran was so absolutely right there. And you talked to my listening audience, you know, a couple months ago or whatever, and said, look, here's how you would do it in China. And by the way, do you think that the uprising and the Muslim population in China, do we have a hand in that, or is it Islam?
Well, I would hope so. I don't want to say we don't, because I don't want to compromise, but we have had involvement in Xinjiang. Let's describe a little bit to your audience. The northern, 1/6 of the population and size of China in the northern province is called Xinjiang. And that's very by chance, interestingly enough. They are Uyghurs, Uighurs. They are old tradesmen. They are not Chinese Han. Han is Han. They're the main population of the rest of China. The Huns, underneath the central communist system, want to dominate this area that they call a separatist movement. It really has been around thousands of years. The Uyghurs are light Muslims. They're not very Islamic fundamentalists. They're traders. They've been there thousands of years on the Silk Road. And it happens that in Xinjiang province, where the Chinese for years have been experimenting with bombs, the atomic bomb, that's where they were blowing it up, it happens to be a lot of oil and gas. So, of course, China wants that area. And, of course, that area is saying, look, we don't want you guys here. We're a totally different entity from mainland China, from the People's Republic of China. We are Uyghurs. We've been around longer than you have. We've been in the trade business longer than you. And if you want to be involved with us, then let us cut into a piece of the oil and gas line. Same thing they did in Nigeria. In the Niger Delta, those who weren't allowed to participate were called terrorists. So the Chinese right now are very vulnerable. Their issue economically, where our issue has to do with liquidity, credit risk, and banking, their issue in China on the economic crisis has to do with political stability. So if somebody like me came in who had the experience of regime change, numerous ones, there are very few who has any experience in this administration, because they all came out of the Clinton era, and all the Clinton boys came out of the Carter era, which was not a very impressive group of people. Richard Holbrooke was not impressive, contrary to what he wants to say, and he was handed over to Pakistan and Afghanistan, but he was also involved in creating the Khmer Rouge, giving them sanction. He was also involved in allowing Duracic, the slaughter of Bosnia, to stay alive for 10 years, and then cowardly said, no, I had nothing to do with it, when in fact he was involved. Carter was involved in giving sanctuary to Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge. He was involved with a lot of chicanery. Yet they're not brought up for that kind of issues. Carter's known for his human rights efforts, and rightfully so, but he had committed a lot of crimes too. So I'm saying to the American public, look, enough is enough. What you have here is an incompetent national security apparatus. Yeah, you could take down Iran, and at the same time you could take down China. Because the minute you could support Iran, the students of China will see that this is very threatening. And there wasn't an accident that about the same time, the Iranian students were protesting Ahmadinejad, who supported, no question supported by Putin directly, and the Russians. And the Russians taught exactly Ahmadinejad how to shut down the tweeters and how to shut down the telephones and the websites. They were the ones who showed them how to do it because they did it in Estonia. The Russians are quite ruthless. There's no question that once you could take down and effectively change the regime in Iran, you could also change the regime in China. And China knows that because the Central Committee of China is very vulnerable. They're very corrupt. There's a lot of cronyism. But that's no pretense to a democracy. There is no democracy in China, and they will tell you that. Here, we have a democracy ostensibly, but not really. Between you and me, Steve, it's really a corrupt republic. And what happens to corrupt republics, if you remember historically? They fall to the Visigoths. They fall to the invaders from the outside. Is that correct?
Absolutely, and that's the problem, because right now, Steve, the people that I know and all the different people I've talked over 15 years of being on talk radio are saying everything is being sold either to the Russians or subsidiaries of the Russians or the Chinese, and they don't want, I don't think people understand this. They're watching the American way of life and the dream go down, and when we come back on the second half of the show, for the second hour, let's talk about this whole chicanery of the non-existent epidemic that's being already proposed, and we're all being scared into taking the vaccinations because you're in the alternate health business, and it's absolutely insane what's going on. But what I want to deal with in this statement right now is the fact that people do not understand that the very foundations of everything that made us great, it doesn't matter if it's manufacturing, and it even doesn't matter if it's the wood products or mining, because Siberia, there are forests in Russia that can be logged just as easy as the ones in the Pacific Northwest. But piecemeal, we've been taken apart, and these men and these women who think that somehow they're going to live the life of luxury in Costa Rica on their military pensions, it doesn't matter if they're intelligent, they don't recognize that once the rest of the world says we've had enough of the chicanery of the American dollar, Americans are going to be, in my opinion, are going to be the most hated group of expatriates that there are.
Well, you're correct. I mean, I have an issue now. I'll give you an example. As I said, I have a company called NBI Health. I produce a product called Osteo-K to prevent fractures and osteoporosis. Osteoporosis affects 39 million people, women primarily. Now, what are they given? Women are given Physomax, Actonil. The effectiveness of those products is 41% fracture risk, prevent fractures. My product is an MK4. It's a vitamin K. It prevents 84%, and I don't have to go in the pharmaceutical industry. I don't have to be corrupt as they are. I just sell it straightforward on the Internet. However, to manufacture it here in the United States, it costs me twice as much as it would to manufacture it in Canada. And you hit it right on the head. So I have to say to myself, is it worth it to put the made in America, to give American jobs, but I'm going to pay twice the amount that I know I can get the same quality, the same quantity that I can get in Canada, which, by the way, doesn't have to have a military, which, by the way, doesn't have to have an intelligence system, which, by the way, does not go to wars but rides on our back, so that they don't have the drainage factor, and they can offer me manufacturing of my product, Osteo-K, at 50% the price that I'm paying now. So it's hitting me as just an ordinary entrepreneur, not a big time, not a big shot guy, but an ordinary entrepreneur, unlike the bankers and all the financiers, as you and I understand, that we cannot manufacture here in the United States. We do not, as entrepreneurs, get benefits from tax benefits. If anything, we're double taxed. We're taxed as a corporation, we're taxed as individuals, and then we're taxed again on our dividends. I mean, how many ways does a government want to tax us into oblivion? And we can't continue. The basis of our country has always been the citizen patriot and the entrepreneur. The citizen who was willing to take arms at a time when we had enemies, which we fought in 1776. Not contrived enemies so that we can go to a war overseas. No one has ever attacked the United States without the United States being part of that attack. In other words, 9/11